For the most part, I'm not going to jump around the stage or anything. All right. All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Jesse Lands, and I'm going to be discussing some PowerShell for incident responders and security professionals. I chose the good, the bad, and the ugly because, well, for one, I'm a big fan of spaghetti westerns, I mean they're great westerns. But what good, bad, and the ugly is on the top list of westerns in the universe. So can't complain about that. So our agenda for today: first, we're going to cover the history of PowerShell, how it's going to be used in the environment. The specific reason I'm covering the history will be because you're going to run in from the basics of PowerShell. PowerShell version 1 up until they're about to release PowerShell version 5. And it's going to be important because PowerShell version 5 has stuff like SSH, which is important, which I'll discover in the future plans. I'm going to go over a lot about the dangers, specifically because that's where, as an incident responder, I kind of feel that you need to be aware of this. A lot of... I just want to see your mic on the other side. This one, or...?
Which one's not mine? I think
is
this
that
one.
Not on?
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's on. Talking too loud.
Hello?
Do we have new batteries for this?
I didn't break it, I promise.
I'm going to take this out front and see. Just continue. We quoted on the stream, but...
Okay. So I'll just yell really loud. Anybody, you guys can hear me back there, or? All right, so it'll just be it'll be different. So the dangers of PowerShell. So I'll discuss some of the actual attacks that have used PowerShell in the past, specifically some of the things that we've seen and some of the other big names within the security community have documented. And then also go over, this is where I'll go over the actual uses for PowerShell within your environment. And the reason that I chose this is because two specific reasons. Talking about PowerShell is a lot of people don't even know that they're vulnerable to PowerShell and PowerShell attacks. And a lot of people don't even know that they have PowerShell as a tool for them to use. A lot of network administrators or system administrators have used PowerShell in the past, but they as a security professional. All right, we're good. All right, but security professionals don't really think of it as a tool. Everybody thinks when a scripting language comes out, it's Python, it's Perl, it's Ruby. And granted, PowerShell really isn't much of a scripting language, so to speak, but it's on every Windows system. Windows, Vista version 2 or Service Pack 1, I believe it was, and higher. It is by default installed. So a little bit about myself. So I work for RSA. I work in the professional services field. That basically means that I technically am supposed to do a lot of security analytics and ECAT work, installs, stuff like that. My primary focus is, in all honesty, is doing SOC evaluations, use case scenarios, working with the actual teams to try to improve their team, or just actually acting as a team member for them. I've worked for some Fortune 100 companies. I've worked for federal law enforcement agencies, and like a lot of you, I've got a full complement of alphabet soup that I could put behind my name, which you really don't care about. And then you can find me on Twitter, where I bitch about customers a lot. All right, yeah. So I've been asked that I was told somebody was going to get me drunk at lunch so I could tell you customer stories. So I'll start off with. So talking to a CISO recently, we had a discussion. I went up to his office. We were talking about how he could improve the company's posture on the related to the internet. Now this is not a CISO of maybe a 2,500 person company. The actual users in this company, I want to say, was around 40,000 users. pretty much in 75 countries. I don't know. It was a lot. So we were discussing different ways that he could do things to improve his posture. And he was talking about some fish that had come in recently, and one of them had a index.php extension. So his brilliant idea was, at this point, you need to block all PHP extensions, because PHP is just a executable, just like an exe, and it's just evil anytime you see it come across the internet. So that's his words of advice, and you know, I don't know. I did what I was told. I was just a consultant. Then, well, I'll give you one more, and then I better actually move on to the presentation, because that's, you know. So then, talking to an individual, the incident response manager, he was telling me about his mentoring an intern. And this intern approached him and said, well, I just finished a college class, C++, very good, but, you know, I don't want to focus on C++, but I need to learn a language. Which language would you recommend? So the individual, being the brilliant incident responder he is, without, you know, basically blinking, says, well, you need to learn HTML because it's just like C++ and it's a great programming language. So we could keep going on like this because, as I'm sure some of my colleagues will tell you, that I could tell you about some really, really stupid people. So what we won't cover, this isn't a beginner's guide to PowerShell. I'm not going to be teaching you what security is. I won't make you rich and famous with PowerShell, and I won't help you find the person, your love mate in life, unless you meet them next to you, and then, you know, do what you want, but do it somewhere else. So, what we will cover. So we're going to go over PowerShell overview. We're going to go over the dangers of PowerShell in your environment, PowerShell, and PowerShell as a security tool. So let's start. First, let's talk about the history of PowerShell. So PowerShell was basically first developed in beta format called Monad. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and if some of you old ancient guys can let me know if I am. In 2005. In 2006, they renamed it to PowerShell. And then the iterations are basically 2009, PowerShell 2 came out and was integrated into Windows 7 and Windows 2008 R2. Older system support was added at 2009 for Windows XP, 2003, Vista, just standard 2008. PowerShell 3, 2012, September, and PowerShell 4 is October 2014. Currently, PowerShell 5 is in development. Got a pre-release in April 2015. Classes introduced. They're going to the zip module, PowerShell Gallery, which everyone's not familiar with that. It's going to be kind of like almost an app repository that you'll be able to sync up and say, I want this module, which I need to go back and talk about something. Do symbolic links, and then a lot of people are all excited about OpenSSH. But in my opinion, you know, what could that possibly be bad for? I mean, you know, exactly. So going back, so with PowerShell, the initial PowerShell, it had what was called plugins and modules. With PowerShell 2, they went away from plugins and now it's modules, but supposedly there's still support for for plugins. All right. Let's talk about the dangers. The popular statement, and there's quite a few advocates for PowerShell, and I'm sure you know you've all heard about other presentations about PowerShell. You know, in a security environment, but there's a lot of people that are completely PowerShell is no more dangerous than anything else in the environment, which in a sense is true. But if you were listening to Harlan Carvey talk earlier, gives you the capability to have command line access to a Windows machine. And most of, specific advanced attackers are going to be using command line access because that's the easiest thing to do. It gives you the capability to basically just pull in modules that you want to use. You don't like it? Well, just download the module, especially if it gives you an app repository to be able to specifically, you don't have this app on there or module on there. I want to bring it down. Give it to me. And there you go. You're good to go. It's not going away. Microsoft has went all in on PowerShell. It's not specifically, just PowerShell, but they've basically said the future is PowerShell. I think they were tired of Linux, in a sense, kicking their ass, as far as command line access and things like that, so they wanted to be able to do that. You can't disable it. I've went into customer environments and handed them PowerShell scripts and say, hey, this is a great tool. You can use this script, help you do a lot of different things. They'll say, well, PowerShell is disabled. Can't use PowerShell. And then I do, a couple commands, and PowerShell's instantly working. Like, you hacked our system. No, you're just an idiot. You don't know that PowerShell is still enabled. So, and then it gives you the keys to the kingdom. Now, granted, you've already got the keys to the kingdom. To use PowerShell, you've kind of sort of already got access to the system. So that's probably a misnomer. It's probably a bad saying to say that. But how about it basically, instead of having to use a lockpick to get into the system, now you've actually got a physical key. I mean, you've still got access, you just got it, easier. So this is basically a simple command, and there's a dozen different commands to bypass any policy, put on that said, nope, you can't have policy, you can't have PowerShell. We're not allowing PowerShell scripts. Simple PowerShell execution policy bypass. Wow, that's secure, isn't it? Right? You got an execution policy? Well, let's just get rid of that. We don't want to use it. And that's literally it. You can do the first one for scripts, the second one after you run PowerShell at a command line. And it gives you full access to PowerShell. So there's some different exploits that have been talked about. And one of them, as far as that, is does constrained spaces save you? And I put a bunch of links in here, and I'll share these slides afterwards. I was a bad boy when I was getting my slides ready. I didn't actually give them to anybody beforehand. But this is a really good article written in 2004 by, I honestly can't remember the guy's name, Clymer. But he's very good in community, very good with PowerShell. What this does is allows you, if constrained spaces are supposed to be, you can only run a certain amount of modules in PowerShell. And that's the way I understand it. If anybody else has got a different understanding, speak up and tell me I'm an idiot. I got thick skin. What this does is just a little bit of a bypass, and it gets you back and gives you full access to all the modules that are currently available in PowerShell. So, again, it goes back to the whole, it's not disabled. There's really no way around it. If you got it on there, someone has local admin access, they have access, period. So, talking about some of the PowerShell attacks in the news being used on your systems. Anybody have a venture to guess? Okay. So PowerShell is used on your system specifically by a lot of sysadmins, so it's going to look like normal use. Specifically, if you use something, to install PowerShell to install programs, PowerShell to, some admins that are really savvy will use it to do, different Active Directory items and things like that. So what you end up basically doing is, you've basically got to sort through the chaff. You've got to look for the needle in the needle stack. So which specific PowerShell actions could have actually been malicious. So I'm going to go into this, but first I'll tell you a story. So I went to another customer, and it's somewhat related because it'll go into my next way. into my next stuff. Went to a customer and they came to me and they said, we've got this Linux system. We recently brought it in from outside the DMZ. So I'm like, what do you mean you recently brought it in? They said, well, it wasn't covered by a firewall. Well, it's Linux, so it should be fine. But it wasn't covered by a firewall. And we recently brought it into the corporate network. We just need you to make sure it's not compromised. And, I'm like, well, okay, it's compromised. No, we need you to look at it. No, it's compromised. Just put a thermite grenade on it and burn it to the ground. No. So they bring it in. I start taking a look at it. And they're like, well, check the memory. Check, see what's going on. And this is where it comes into what I'm about to talk about. Like, well, let me look at the uptime first. The uptime, 7 days. What do you mean 7 days? It's a Linux system. Why is it up for 7 days? Why, at what point did you have to bring it in 7 days? When did you bring it in? We brought it in 6 months ago. So what are you doing? Well, he reboots it every week. Why does he reboot a Linux system every week? I'm thinking, oh, maybe he updated it recently. No. So it's a Red Hat Linux it was built in 2007. So it had been sitting on the network or outside of the network since 2007. Memory was useless. Logging was set to roll over every 5 days. Great, yeah, I know, it's outstanding stuff. And on top of that, the admin who had been using it as his own personal FTP server. So he was using it to store whatever, let's say, inappropriate videos that he likes. So, yeah, at that point, again, my recommendation was, here's a thermite grenade, just burn it to the ground. They don't listen to me. All right, so what does PowerShell look like in your system? In your system, in your network, on your devices. So you've basically got your standard, what can you look at in the network or on your device? You've got your memory, your network. What other kind of things can we look at? Logs, anything else? We can look at the disk. That's really about it. It's not going to put anything in registry because PowerShell's already in registry. It's already there working. Excuse me. So if we run a memory capture on it, again, we're going to see different things. We're going to see logs. We're going to see network. What would you see? What kind of things would you actually see in the logs, though? All interactive and stuff. You guys it's lunch. They gave me the shitty spot, huh? Right after lunch, were you all asleep? Okay, so you go see basically your installs, your different things. Basically look like standard usage. You're going to look like, you know what an average user would do. So, but you can see the programs that run. Specifically, what I'm going to cover is if you use memory. So we got to actually take a snapshot of memory and look at different things. What would happen. So we pulled out, we're going to use volatility command scan. Everybody familiar with volatility? Yes, thank you, good. All right, so looking at it's going to show our PowerShell. Anybody see the problem here with this? We had Harlan talk about this earlier. Say again? Exactly. So PowerShell got executed, and then it brought its own console up. I think that's what you said, right? Good, I'm deaf. It's okay. So we didn't actually see anything. So we go to consoles, and that might help a little bit more. So then we can see all kinds of goodies in the console from application PowerShell.exe. But then we go back to the commands, and it's still just PowerShell. So you have the capability to look into the PowerShell console and see what different commands you may have run, but your command.scan isn't going to help you much. But that's really the only way you're going to see exactly what the attacker did on your actual system with PowerShell. As far as, could you do it through full packet capture on your network? That would depend. I mean, you're literally going to have to look at, was your was your attacker nice enough to use plain text, connection? Did he use a web shell? Which, if he used a web shell, yes, you'd be able to see it. If he used, encrypted RDP, what good did it do you? You didn't do anything. So with that being said, that's what you're going to have to worry about in your environment. Now, should you want to use these actual tools within your environment, which the reasoning behind my logic for this was going into one of my infamous customers. They asked me to work with them in their incident response role. So I'm working with the company, and they come in, they hand me a whole bunch of registry keys. They say, okay, this is what said three-letter agency gave me and said, these are evil, find them on your network, because if you find them, it's bad. I said, okay, so what host-based scanning tool do you have in place for me to use? What? What's host-based scanning? No, really, what do you have? Well, we got Symantec. Oh, great, thanks, that helps. So my idea for them was to use a simple PowerShell script to be able to read a specific, text file, so to speak, pull in that and scan, go through each registry. Had to be able to run it from the domain controllers, had to be able to push it down, and it ended up, that got tanked just because, well, they didn't want to put any effort into it, and they would rather actually just pay my contract out for me to sit and watch cats on YouTube, I guess, I don't know. So, first thing you need to do as far as PowerShell goes, you need to be able to find out what version. This goes back to what I was telling you before, because if in certain versions you're going to be able to instantly check different things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but like PowerShell 4 has the capability to do MD5 sum on a single file. Before that, you had to go through an elaborate script to just get a MD5. And it involved a bunch of math and different things like that I'm not going to go into because I suck at math. So, but the simplest command is as a PowerShell prompt, PowerShell.exe, command prompt gives you the PS, blah, blah, blah. Run PS version table.ps version. And that'll tell you which version, which subversion, which minor patch to said subversion you've got. So if you want to then use your PowerShell guru, your kung fu, that you're now, I'm going to get all excited and use PowerShell in my environment to fix the world. Good luck. So then you could do different things. Just for maintenance, you could check your patching. This should be an admin job, but I know you guys had never had to do your admin's roles for them at all, and that should never happen, I'm sure, right? So you've never had to check your patching. You never had to check your user's privileges, and you've never had to check your user modify user. I'm sure that happens like never, right? They're all telling you that. So patching. This is a simple example. I stole from this guy. Well, it's actually from Microsoft, but somebody submitted it. And you can't read it, but like I said, if you email me, which if anybody needs my email address, then let me know. But I can provide you slides. It's a simple script you can run. It'll download. It'll tell you all the patches that you have downloaded and installed on your system. There's an actual script out there, a module, so to speak. That's one thing that I like about PowerShell is you have the capability that if you wanted to do anything, it's kind of like what Rule 32 or whatever. You think about it long enough and somebody's actually written it for you. Rule 32 is probably a bad example, but so then you can list all the patches that were installed in the last 2 days. So you got the patch Tuesday came out and you said, hey, did my admins patch this server, or did I get pwned, so to speak? I actually used this a week ago. So we had a fish come in at a customer I was working at, and said customer had handed me a list of 40 email addresses. Said, hey, I need the usernames for all these 40 email addresses. It's like, well, what do you have something like quick scripted search you could look at? No. Just use their Active Directory MMC console and, look up each individual user. Took, 3 minutes to write the script. Just basically path to the line, take, line out, give me your email address, and then give me the SAM user account. But that 5-minute script, as an incident responder, saved me probably about 2.5 hours or an hour and a half, maybe, I don't know, I'm slow, of clicking a mouse, which I hate clicking a mouse. So I talked about this a little bit. These are just examples. The whole process in my logic for a lot of this stuff is I go into a lot of incident response teams, and they don't really understand what they can do with PowerShell. And that's why I wanted to bring this up, because I've been in environments where they don't think outside the box. They don't think of, let's solve the issue with the scripts that are readily available. I've had people say, well, can't we just install Python or Perl on these Windows systems? Well, why would we do that when we've got PowerShell already installed? Granted, it's different. You might actually have to learn something new. God forbid you learn something new, but it's available. Now, this is probably going to pique everybody's interest in here because, everybody wants to be a pen tester. Powersploit. If you haven't seen Powersploit, it's pretty much what, if you wanted to go exploring what your attackers would use against you, go look at Powersploit. The pivoting, lateral movement, like Harlan talked about earlier, adding users, downloading payloads, antivirus bypass. I'm not even going to go into it too much because I'm not a pen tester, but I know it's going to interest a lot of you individually. And then what Harlan again was talking about earlier, PowerShell and Mimikatz. Simple script, invoke Mimikatz, and it goes out, downloads Mimikatz, and launches it on your system. Gives you, all kinds of goodness. Forensics. So years ago, I was working with a couple smart individuals in here, smarter than myself, and we had a live response script that we ran. And everybody's familiar with live response script, right? Yes, I think you all are. And some of these individuals went to a little conference just a little south of here called DerbyCon. And they were all excited about PowerShell to point. And individual named Nick Hoffman came back. I don't know, you guys know Nick? So, is he in here? Did he ever show up? Little turd. So he came back and he said, hey, this is really awesome. Him and another little guy named Nate said, we're going to write live response in PowerShell. And lo and behold, somebody had already done it. So, well, he was late. But then what I was talking about earlier was indicator scanner and memory collection for memory tools. Now, I tried the memory collection, and it works only on specific versions. So I've got to tweak with the tool a little bit, but that's an individual, and he's on my last slide as people to pay attention to. He wrote Powersploit. The guy's a freaking genius when it comes to PowerShell. If anything he's got, read it. He's the one that wrote, there's the link to the memory capture. I was going to give you a example of it, but like I said, I could never really get it to work right. So there's the live response. Excellent paper at sans.org on live response with PowerShell. Individual wrote this up, and then it's on Codeplex. There's a sample of the code. For those not familiar with live response, I know there was an individual talked earlier about if you had to deal with lawyers and things like that. This is more for your intrusion. I'm never going to prosecute. We're never going to do anything beyond find out what they stole. So you collect your pertinent information, memory, volatile, stuff like that, logs, different things like that. Put it into a nice package where you could download it and take a look at it on another system. But I recommend if you get a chance to take a look at this guy's code. It's really good, fairly neat, does a lot of what you need. So if you don't have anything in place, this would be a good item to get. That being said, you don't really have to install anything else. You've got PowerShell. It's on your systems. If you're interested in live response, there are some live response for Mac and for Linux out there. And I have worked on a few of them, but yeah, well, that's where the ugly part comes in. Anything that I've coded is the ugly part. So, indicator scanning. So here's kind of a snip of what the tool was that I was working toward specifically. I cleaned it up a little bit so it does a regex to look for a specific IP, or I'm sorry, all the IPs. So it'll search the HKCU, and it'll specifically look in each registry key and does it see an IP address and then give you a response. And that's all it does. My actual script, what it had done was, that was supposed to be its own, I guess I missed a slide. I must have the old one. I apologize. But my script would go through, read a specific file, and give you different registry keys, and then go into each system remotely. Well, you would push it down remotely and scan the file, then use something else I'll show you in a little bit that I've gotten in a cleaner script to email me the results. All right, so we found evil. And, like I said, I'm not giving you a how-to PowerShell. So I apologize if everybody's, there's somebody disappointed. I got people walking out on me. This is terrible. No, I'm just kidding. So when I was working as an incident responder for a local company, I hated users. I'll be honest with you, I hate them. And some individuals in here can attest to that. I would interact with users, and I send them a message on our little instant messenger and say, hey, you've got detection. We detected this piece of malware on your system. We just need to clean it up. The amount of things that would happen to the laptop when you tell them, hey, you've got something on your computer we need to investigate, clean up, would amaze you, or maybe not. You would send them a message, hey, you've got something on your computer. Suddenly the computer would go offline. 3 hours later, they'd come back and say, oh, really? Did you talk to me? I just had my system re-imaged. I didn't know you were talking to me. Hard drives were shipped, but never arrived. Oh, the mail must have taken it. And then, of course, you've got, well, the whole, the expression from, Dual Cores Music where he's like, oh, hold on while I run antivirus 2009. And, it happens. It happens so much. I literally asked for permission to waterboard some of our users, and I was denied. I did put the request in multiple times. I was still denied. But I do work for RSA, not NSA, so I guess that I didn't get the proper training for waterboarding. But I wrote a script because I hated users that we would run remotely for an MCERT malware cleanup. We were having a big problem with Zeus, so to speak, and so I would run this script remotely on the systems. It would download MCERT, clean up the system, send me a nice email with their logs. We can use it for user removal, computer removal, and then file scanning. Now, this is what I was talking about. If we would go with the remediation. I don't know why I put this here instead of detection, but I don't know. One too many beers, whatever. All right, so my cleanup script, which I posted on the internet, nice and clean. Actually, this is the older version. I've got a newer version, little tweaks and stuff like that. But again, it's PowerShell, run it, PowerShell, execution bypass, and your whatever you want to call it. it goes out, you modify it to, your proxy and different things like that. Goes out nicely in the background, runs mcert, which everybody knows what mcert is, right? Microsoft's malware removal tool. Downloads it on the system, cleans it up, sends you an email with all the goodness that it's done, throws $1 in the Microsoft bucket from your Bitcoins, and then cleans itself off the system. Removes the PowerShell script, removes the mcert. Like I said, this is the old one because I cleaned it up a little bit. So that's kind of my example of my best script, which is pretty pathetic, I know. But that's what I use it a lot for. I'll go out and write some different things. And most of what I write is on the fly, but that's where I was trying to get the point across to you all, is you need to be able to have these tools in place where you already have them. You don't need to worry about going out and installing Python or going out and finding a new tool to clean up what already exists, because Microsoft was nice enough to give you, a tool that you and China can use to exploit your system. All right, so these are 3 individuals that I would recommend highly if you could read anything from them. It's worth reading. That being said, Jeffrey Hicks and Don Jones are Microsoft MVP / fanboys. And Don Jones is the one that says there's nothing in PowerShell that is malicious, it's just how you use it. Well, there's nothing malicious in, anything that they seem to exploit on Windows, but it's there. And then Matt Graber, he's the guy that once you get the basics of PowerShell, read everything that man has wrote. He wrote PowerSploit. He wrote the memory tool. He's got a blog. He's well worth reading everything about. And I got about 20 minutes. I kind of went a little bit shorter. So let me see, what other stories can I throw out for you? Let's see, trying to think what else. Yes, sir.
Have you ever heard of PoshSec?
PoshSec, yes, I have.
Okay, so that just recently went live.
Right, so that's the PoshSec, and it's like he said, he was talking about, and I'll go into a little bit because I haven't really looked into it a lot, but if you get the opportunity, I think it would be very beneficial. Have you used it?
Yeah, a little bit. Ben 10, one of the guys that helped develop PoshSec, was actually at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about it, running through some scenarios. And it's basically a framework for storing a lot of these scripts.
Right.
You build libraries, and they have these libraries built in a GUI. So you can
In a GUI?
Yeah, in GUI format. So if you don't know which one to, explore, read, determine if that's what you want, then you can go through and select them with a graphical user interface. And it does everything from baselining all the way up to lessons learned, the entire incident response chain, if you will. And it's actually really good.
Yeah, see, I stumbled across it a couple weeks ago, and then never got around to adding it, but I'm glad you brought it up because I completely forgot about it. So PoshSec is, like he said, it's a bunch of modules that some very smart individuals wrote specifically for this type of scenario, that PowerShell for security professionals. I think that's actually what the title is, or something along that lines. Yeah.
The intent is for people that are just starting out to use the tool until they learn PowerShell.
Okay.
That never happens.
No. Well, especially if you build a tool that's just for, newbies. I mean, once you gave them the easy button, why are they ever going to use something else? So yeah, we got that. All right, so we got any questions? Yes, sir.
Where do we start with learning PowerShell?
Okay, so if you don't know PowerShell, there are some really good videos, YouTube videos, honestly. There's 2 books that I would recommend, actually by Jeffrey Hicks and John Jones. One is the PowerShell in like a month of lunches or whatever, and the other one is the PowerShell handbook, or maybe, I don't know, it's from Manning, it's got some guy in a weird looking dress or something on the cover, I don't know what it is, but it's really good. Did I bring my copy with me? I did not. So those are 2 books, but you don't need to really buy anything. Like he was saying, go to the PoshSec, look at those modules. Microsoft does have a good beginner's course of videos on PowerShell. We had an intern recently at another customer, and he asked me the same question, and that was basically what I recommended. I gave him, there's a couple YouTube links, and I don't have them off the top of my head, and then a Microsoft video series on basic PowerShell, some of it being taught by Don Jones. Any other questions? I got like 15 minutes. I'm sure you guys probably want to just go wake up or something. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that PowerShell version 4 uses Hash
Yes.
I think so. This might also download configuration files that are already listed from sources. PowerShell validate a signature on a file, download instructions.
So that's going to go back with your execution bypass, and I apologize for not including that. So what happens is with a lot of, you can't physically disable PowerShell within your environment at all. But you can set it so strict that only signed modules can be run, or it can only be used by signed processes. Or it can be, you could set it to, it'd be signed, unsigned, or just, like I said, bypass or no restriction whatsoever. As far as could it be set to only run specific files, like as download an executable, and if that signature is there on that executable, I think it goes back to the whole thing, and I don't know, so if anybody knows, correct me if I'm wrong. It goes back to, it only does the signature checking that is set at the GPO, and if you've just disabled that for the session or bypassed for that session, it's not going to matter because it's gone anyway. Now, as far as MD5 signature, that's only going to happen at that's only a module that has physically been added by Microsoft at version 4. There is a way to do an MD5 signature prior to that, but like I said, it involves a bunch of math calculations. Any other questions? Yes, sir. I have not. I didn't even know it was possible to log specific PowerShell commands. In what way?
I saw a recent post where you can kind of hack PowerShell config a little bit so that it logs it just like you would the command prompt the event logs. Of course, you have to actually get event logs set to that level first, which is a challenge. But I didn't know if you'd ever actually seen that.
I have not. What I found in most environments that I actually do have that level of technical expertise to be able to do things along that lines, they either have one of 2 problems. Well, they don't care because they just don't care, or they don't have the storage that would be necessary to maintain that amount of logs. Right now, just in many of the environments I consult in, the amount of storage that they do to maintain a specific time frame, and just a month, or do a cold storage, we're talking in the hundreds of terabytes, and just try and get the execs to get a decision on what actually do you want to maintain for a certain length of time. I can guarantee that command line is not going to be one of those options. While, great, I would love to see it, and I think it would be awesome, specifically as an incident responder, to be able to see logs from command line. Some CEO somewhere is looking and going, well, can I fly my personal jet to, my next golf outing, or should I get some more logging? And, what do you think they're going to take? Obviously the logging, right? So, any other questions? Yes, sir. I rely on what the customer wants. So the question was, do I rely on PowerShell for all my LR analysis? I do not. I've went into environments where, fortunately, we've had some level of, predisposed intelligence that may or may not have come with my original contribution 7 years ago. And that's just by coincidence. Most environments that I go to either, like I was just saying, either have the expertise in place that can already do some type of analysis as far as, live response, or they just don't care because they are 1 to 2 people deep and I'm just giving them enough scripts or enough items to basically get their security manager, security director from firing them. So, any other questions? So, in most environments, it's like you were saying, or the question you were asking. So, I do a lot of consulting. I literally flew in from Chicago Thursday night. I'm flying back to Chicago tomorrow, and I have to go with what the customer wants. I can make all kinds of recommendations, but I like to default to PowerShell for specific reasons. In that it's already there. I've already got a canned set of scripts that I hand to the customer and say, "Hey, here, I'm making your life easier because, well, you suck right now. So I'm doing my due diligence. There's no warranty, there's no guarantee, there's no nothing. Here, read this book, read this, watch this video. Just learn something, do something, because you're not gonna, these customers may not have the capability to spend $1 million on RSA's ECAT or, something along that lines. They don't have that. Their technology, is not there. They're, in the incident response field, a lot of people call them the low-hanging fruit. Well, there's a reason there's a low-hanging fruit. It's as I was saying to a couple individuals here recently, Cincinnati is surprisingly, you wouldn't believe it, with the smaller community it is, but you have a lot of intelligent people here. It gets a lot thinner base of intelligence once you go out to different areas. These people are getting... yeah, I know, that's saying a lot, isn't it? You get these areas, these companies that are really, because we were talking about an individual, a coworker from past, Josh and I, that went to a company and was ready to quit after a week because the individuals that he was working with, to put it bluntly, couldn't find their ass with both hands. And it's just, you get to that point where you're going to a company where there's 35,000 individuals and they're willing to put 2 positions toward incident response. And you're like, oh, wait. Okay, so what else? Where's your other security team? Oh, well, that's you. You can do SecOps too. You can do, architecture and so on and so forth. Like, so how much time do you actually spend for incident response? Well, I check logs every Monday morning. It's like, oh, great. Well, good. Bye. I'm sure they won't do anything before then. So, any other questions or? Have I done that? I have. I'd have to refresh my memory what I've specifically done, but I've also heard rumor, and someone else can confirm or deny. I do not know. I do understand that they're in the works to replace some of the sysinternals tools specifically with PowerShell scripts. Anything else? Okay. So on that note, So I'll talk about one last customer, and then I want to leave you on a good note. Otherwise, you guys are going to leave here and go, he just didn't really tell us anything. But well, I didn't. But I told you about a lot of customers that are idiots. So just recently had an argument with a customer. I know we talked about volatility a little while ago, and I'm going to fill out my 8 minutes. Don't worry about that. So I got 7 minutes yet. So had a conversation with a customer. Customer was all excited, thought he was the super guru of everything that was memory analysis. And for those of you not familiar with memory analysis, I apologize because it might go over your heads. But this individual scripted out to take a memory capture from a box he thought was infected. And he ran volatility and ripped out all the EXEs out of the memory capture. And then had a script that would then submit all those memory captured MD5s to VirusTotal. And was all excited because every time he ran it, he'd come back with no positive hits. So his system must be infected with APT. Because, Lord knows APT doesn't have anything on VirusTotal. And everybody knows what the problem with that is, right? So when you pull out, well, I guess you don't. But when you pull out a EXE out of memory, the odds of you actually getting a MD5 of the actual correct file are about what, like 1 in 10 billion or something like that? But so he checked each time and roughly would pull out about 70 EXEs, and none of them were on VirusTotal, so he was creating all these incidents with all this new malware, and he wanted to send it up to, for all these, he had a contract with a IR team, specifically from some AV vendor, and he would submit all this malware and, want a big detailed report as to what malware these attackers were specifically using on his system. And I had to pull out the Art of Memory Forensics and show him specifically in the book where it says, this does not work. And he stopped talking to me for 2 weeks, but, so win for me! All right. So that's all I got. I hope you guys got something out of it. And, if you got any questions or concerns or you want to just tell me stop with the damn stories, feel free.